Nobody really saw this coming for the New York Knicks. With just one roster spot left to fill in free agency, a new name has suddenly been linked to the team, someone who hadn't been part of the conversation until now. While there's still speculation about a possible reunion with a familiar face from recent years, and while the chatter around Ben Simmons hasn't completely gone away, the situation has started to shift in some interesting ways. On SportsCenter, the panel broke down the moving parts, and it's worth going through exactly what they discussed. Despite it being mid-August and most of the big free agency dominoes already falling, the Knicks, like a few other teams, still have business to handle. They have 2 contracts left to hand out, one expected to go to a rookie minimum deal, and another for the veteran minimum. While the rookie slot has gone quiet, the veteran spot is where most of the attention is focused. The name that surfaced most often is Ben Simmons. According to the discussion, the Knicks are intrigued by his size and versatility. The idea that he could be both a front-court presence and a primary ball handler is rare in today's league. Simmons is the only player on the market who can offer that combination, though the obvious concern is his lack of shooting. For years, off-season clips have shown him taking jumpers with confidence, but game situations tell a different story. Now 29 years old, he's coming off a season where he averaged just 5 points, 5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists between the Clippers and Nets, before being played off the floor in the postseason against Denver. Still, the panel noted that New York's interest remains, and it's not just about Simmons. Another possible target is a traditional center, which makes sense given their current rotation of Karl-Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson, and Ariel Hukporti. If Tom Thibodeau opts for a double-big lineup with Towns and Robinson starting, that leaves just one true backup 5 on the roster. There are creative options, sliding Gershon Yabusele down to center in stretches, or even using OG Anunoby there briefly. But adding another pure big man would provide more stability, especially given Robinson's history with injuries. One name mentioned on SportsCenter was Thomas Bryant, who split last season between Miami and Indiana. In 14.5 minutes per game, he averaged 6.5 points, 4 rebounds, and an assist, shooting 32% from 3, including 41% from the corners, and 51% overall. Bryant's defense isn't his calling card, but his offensive production and rebounding could give New York valuable depth behind their starters. The Simmons factor complicates things, though. His ability to cover multiple roles is part of the appeal, but the lack of shooting in certain lineups could be a major issue. As the panel pointed out, a second unit featuring Simmons, Robinson, and Josh Hart could struggle badly to space the floor, potentially creating offensive logjams that opposing defenses could exploit. In that scenario, Simmons might only be playable in the postseason if he's locked into a pure center role, filling in for an injured Robinson or Town. That's where the conversation started to turn toward possible adjustments, including giving more minutes to Ariel Hukporti if the Knicks decide not to add another veteran big, Hukporti, which I definitely want to see the Knicks use more this coming season. Honestly, I'm not overly concerned if the Knicks decide to roll with a double big lineup and opt not to sign another center. There are really 2 situations at play here. First, I believe Mike Brown will manage the minutes between Karl-Anthony Towns and Mitchell Robinson extremely well, even if they're starting together. He knows how to stagger minutes effectively so that one of them is always on the floor while keeping both fresh. Secondly, Brown isn't afraid of small ball lineup, and he's also not hesitant to give younger players meaningful minutes. Ariel Hukporti, at 23, isn't a rookie in the strict sense, but he's still young enough to absorb responsibility. He's shown the hunger and readiness to take that step, and I think this season is when he could really show what he can do in high-leverage moments. Additionally, Yabusele could serve as a small ball 5 in Brown's system. The Knicks have real flexibility there, and the panel noted a potential scenario where they could run Deuce McBride alongside Jalen Brunson, with Malik at the 3, OG at the 4, and Towns at 5. This isn't speculation pulled from thin air. Mike Brown has used similar lineups in Sacramento, deploying De'Aaron Fox, Malik Monk, Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis as a starting 5. during their playoff run. The rotation usually had Dave Mitchell coming off the bench to relieve Fox or Monk, showing that Brown is comfortable leaning heavily into small ball at the start of games and for extended periods. The discussion also compared Towns' versatility to Sabonis' previous role with the Kings. Sabonis often played 5 while providing shooting and rim protection, but Towns offers even greater flexibility, capable of sliding between 4 and 5 seamlessly. This allows the Knicks to maintain spacing and defensive balance, something Brown has mastered from his time with Sacramento. Towns at 5 in certain lineups shouldn't be a surprise, especially if Brunson and McBride are in the backcourt, replicating a system Brown has seen succeed elsewhere. The conversation then turned to Thomas Bryant, a player who caught the panel's attention given his previous performance in the Eastern Conference Final. In 4 games against the Knicks, he hit timely threes, including a 50% mark from deep, although on limited attempts. His standout game came in the elimination matchup, where 3 clutch threes helped swing momentum against New York. Bryant, now a free agent, is reportedly in advanced discussions to sign a deal potentially worth up to $3 million per year, according to overseas sources. If that deal goes through, he could provide the Knicks with scoring off the bench and some interior rebounding, though there's also the chance he opts to play overseas for a larger role, similar to what Daniel Theis did in a prior season. Finally, the panel turned their attention to Precious Achiuwa. Achiuwa's role with the Knicks has been more limited, but he has shown flashes of effectiveness, particularly in the playoffs. Over 17 career playoff games, he averaged roughly 3.5 points, 3 rebounds, and nearly a block per game. Last season, during stretches where injuries forced the Knicks to rotate heavily, Achiuwa saw about 20 minutes per game, averaging 6.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, while shooting 48% from the field and providing solid defense with over a block per game. There's clearly interest in evaluating whether Achiuwa could return as a rotational big, giving New York flexibility at the 5 and offering depth that complements Towns and Robinson. So, as the panel outlined, the Knicks have multiple ways to approach their final roster spots. Whether it's trusting Hukporti and Yabusele in creative lineups, adding Bryant for depth and scoring, or considering Achiuwa for defensive versatility, the team has options that give Mike Brown the flexibility to experiment and maximize his rotation. This could be a critical factor in maintaining consistency and resilience over a long NBA season. Finally, the conversation turned more specifically to Precious Achiuwa, a player who's shown flashes of impact but whose future with the Knicks has been uncertain. Over his time in New York, Achiuwa averaged roughly 6.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, and nearly a block and a steal per game. Notably, he achieved this in inconsistent minutes, which makes those numbers even more impressive. Defensively, he was a positive presence on the floor, and he shot about 50% from the field during his stints. At certain moments, Achiuwa was an extremely helpful piece for the Knicks, particularly when injuries forced rotations to shift and younger players were getting major minutes. Since then, however, there hasn't been much news regarding Achiuwa's next destination. He purchased a home in South Beach, Miami, which some speculate might signal a return to the Miami Heat, where his career first took off. At the same time, Achiuwa has remained in touch with his Knicks teammates from that era, keeping lines of communication open and showing he still has ties to the locker room culture. Even casual interactions like joking exchanges with Josh Hart hint at the ongoing camaraderie within the group. So, while it's always felt like Achiuwa might ultimately move on, there's still a scenario where he could return to New York, at least as a side option. But, as the panel pointed out, the organization might prefer to go in a slightly different direction. If the Knicks are going to bring in a player like Achiuwa, someone who doesn't occupy a traditional position and comes with certain limitations, they may as well consider a higher profile, more versatile option like Ben Simmons. Simmons, while not identical to Achiuwa, brings a level of positional flexibility that covers much of what Achiuwa does on the floor. He can operate as a point guard, a power forward, or even slide into the center role if needed, giving Mike Brown multiple ways to configure lineup. In many ways, signing Simmons could essentially solve the same roster issues Achiuwa might address, but at a higher ceiling. It's a strategic decision that the Knicks seem to be leaning toward. Compartmentalize the roster and bring in Simmons as the primary versatile piece rather than rely on Achiuwa. Of course, if Simmons eventually signs, it's possible that interest in Achiuwa could resurface, but the consensus on the panel was that this seems unlikely. The discussion wrapped up by weighing the alternative options, such as Thomas Bryant. Bryant provides traditional big man scoring, rim protection, and offensive rebounding, which Achiuwa doesn't fully replicate. The Knicks could look at him as a bench stabilizer, giving depth at the 5, especially if injury concerns arise with Mitchell Robinson or Karl Anthony Towns. But when considering overall positional versatility and the ability to impact multiple facets of the game, Simmons offers more upside, which seems to be why the team is leaning toward prioritizing him. So, for Knicks fans, the question remains: should the team consider bringing back Thomas Bryant or Precious Achiuwa, or should they just commit fully to adding Ben Simmons to this roster, covering much of the same ground as those other two players, but with significantly more positional flexibility? That's the debate right now, and it's one to watch closely as free agency continues to evolve. Let me know what you think. Are you in favor of the Knicks targeting Bryant or bringing back Achiuwa for depth? Or do you believe Simmons is the clear choice to address these needs and give Mike Brown the versatile piece he's looking for? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated on every move the Knicks make this off-season. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, go Knicks! On First Take this morning, the panel opened with some buzz that could send ripples through the New York Knicks' offseason. According to one well-placed NBA insider, there's strong momentum inside the organization to bring back a player who wore the Knicks uniform last season, someone they believe could slot perfectly into the final open spot on their roster. But that's not where the story ends. Alongside that, there are whispers of the front office looking to bring in yet another free agent. The twist? To make both moves happen, they'd have to move an existing player through a trade. The conversation quickly shifted to the name that's been circulating in nearly every Knicks-related rumor mill lately: Landry Shamet. Multiple insiders have hinted at his potential fit, but one in particular, speaking on air, painted a clear picture of why there's genuine mutual interest between Shamet and the Knicks. From the front office's perspective, it's not just about his ability to space the floor or knock down threes, although that remains one of his calling cards. It's also about the professional approach he brings to the game and the way he's been able to contribute in high-pressure moments. The organization hasn't forgotten the resilience he showed last season, grinding his way back from a significant shoulder injury that could have derailed his year. He didn't just return. He fought his way into meaningful minutes, ultimately making a noticeable impact during the playoffs despite having been out of the rotation for a long stretch. That speaks to both his mental toughness and his ability to stay prepared, even when the opportunities aren't immediately there. In the Knicks' locker room, that kind of persistence earns a level of respect that can't be faked. Players know who's putting in the work behind the scenes, and Shamet's reputation as a steady, low-maintenance presence has only strengthened his standing with both teammates and coaches. There's a comfort level with him, a sense that he understands his role, buys into the system, and knows how to complement the stars without trying to force the spotlight onto himself. For a team chasing deep playoff runs, those intangibles are every bit as valuable as his three-point stroke. For weeks, New York had been keeping an eye on Ben Simmons' free agency decision before finalizing this last roster spot. But as First Take emphasized, that patience has run its course. Simmons has yet to make any public announcement, and no one from his camp has provided clarity on his next destination. At this point, the Knicks seem ready to move forward, and even when Simmons was being discussed earlier this summer, Shamet's name was always brought up in the same breath. That's not a coincidence. His shooting, his fit within the current system, and his ability to thrive in a well-defined bench role make him an attractive option. Then came the curveball. According to the insider, the Knicks may not be satisfied with just Shamet. There's real interest in adding another veteran presence alongside him, which would mean reinforcing the bench with experience and versatility. The challenge, of course, is making the numbers work. As was pointed out during the discussion, the only realistic way to pull this off would be to open up both a roster spot and some cap space, which means making a trade. The takeaway? The Knicks are exploring ways to keep Shamet in the fold, while still leaving the door open for another veteran acquisition, possibly even Simmons if the situation plays out in their favor. It's a balancing act between patience and proactivity, and right now, the sense from inside Madison Square Garden is that the front office is prepared to act sooner rather than later. As the discussion continued on First Take, the insider made one thing clear: the only realistic way for the Knicks to pull off this double signing is to move a current player off the roster. It's not just about opening a slot, it's about creating enough cap flexibility to bring in another piece beyond Landry Shamet. That would mean parting ways with someone on a guaranteed NBA deal, a decision that would need to be made before training camp tips off. From what was laid out, the options are actually pretty limited. In simple terms, there are really only two legitimate routes to make this happen. Either you completely dump a contract and take back nothing in return, or you execute a trade that sends out more salary than you bring back. On paper, the financial mechanics of both scenarios are straightforward. The math either works or it doesn't. But as the panel emphasized, what looks clean on a spreadsheet doesn't always make sense in the real world of roster construction. This is where the strategy gets complicated. Moving a player just for the sake of adding another body, especially if that body ends up being the 10th or 11th man in the rotation, carries serious risk. Depth is valuable, but depth that comes at the cost of proven production and locker room stability can end up doing more harm than good. And that risk is magnified when you're talking about a roster as complete and well-balanced as New York's current group. Once the conversation shifted to the specifics of who could realistically be moved, one name emerged almost immediately: Mitchell Robinson. To be absolutely clear, no one on the panel suggested that Robinson is actively being shopped, nor did they claim that the front office has already decided to move on from him. Still, when you strip away emotion and look at the situation through a purely strategic lens, it's easy to see why his name comes up so quickly in these cap-clearing scenarios. Robinson checks several boxes in this type of discussion. He's extension eligible yet hasn't inked a new deal, meaning his current contract status gives the team flexibility, but also creates uncertainty. He's essentially on an expiring contract which, from a financial standpoint, can be extremely attractive to other teams looking for a short-term commitment or immediate roster relief. And while his impact as a rim protector, rebounder, and defensive anchor is undeniable, the Knicks' depth in the front court gives them at least some leeway if they were ever forced to part with him. In the cap management world, that combination, a valuable on-court contributor, a contract that can come off the books quickly, and a skill set that multiple teams covet, often makes a player's name surface in trade talks, even when there's no active push to move him. It's not about undervaluing Robinson's role, it's about recognizing the kind of asset he represents. If the team ever decided that clearing salary space for another key piece outweighed the benefits of keeping him on the roster, Robinson is still extension eligible, but talks have been quiet. He hasn't signed a new deal, and in practical terms, that puts him on what is essentially an expiring contract. That alone makes him a logical candidate in trade hypotheticals, not because he isn't valuable, but because his contract structure gives the team flexibility if they need to free up money fast. If the Knicks wanted to create the room to sign another veteran without taking on long-term financial commitments, trading Robinson for a player with a smaller salary would be one of the most straightforward ways to open that door. The problem, of course, is that Robinson is more than just a line item on a cap sheet. He's one of the league's best rim protectors, a consistent rebounder, and a defensive anchor who changes the way opponents attack the paint. Replacing that level of impact, especially in a postseason setting, is far from easy. That's why, even though the numbers might make sense, the basketball argument for such a move is far less convincing. But here's where the debate heated up. Is it worth it? Moving a proven rim protector and rebounder just to make room for another veteran bench piece, potentially even Ben Simmons, felt like a stretch to some at the desk. The consensus from several voices was clear. Forcing a move just to force it rarely works out. This team, as it stands, is already among the NBA's best. And if you want validation beyond the panel's opinion, just look at the odds makers. According to the latest numbers from FanDuel, the Knicks currently sit second in projected odds to win the Eastern Conference next season at plus 270, trailing only Cleveland at plus 240. The Magic follow at 500, with the Hawks and Sixers further back. It's essentially a three-team race in the East, and New York is right there in the thick of it. Before making this final roster addition, that's why the takeaway was simple. The Knicks should be patient. Lock in Shamet, use that final spot wisely, and let this group grow together under new head coach Mike Brown. The talent is there, the chemistry is building, and there's no need to jeopardize that with unnecessary roster churn.